Okay, this is part 2 of Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020, Logic Pro class, and continuing. Um, so let's look at this situation with the bus pairs now and see what it looks like in the mixer window. Well, actually, this is going to be the mixer layer of the environment, not the mixer window itself. So right away, you see all this craziness down here below the faders. And we're going to be learning how to create all this craziness next week. Doesn't that make you happy? Smile. I see heads shaking in fear. It's okay. I'll take care of you. Don't worry. Nevertheless, you will see that, for example, I have 4 French horns that send to bus 5 and output to bus 6. And I have 4 trumpets that also send to bus 5 and output to bus 6, and 4 trombones that send to bus 5 and output to bus 6. Bus 6, as it happens, is, oh, that window open in a wrong monitor. There we go. Bus 6 happens to be the track stack for the brass. So if I click here, you can see kind of more what the situation is. Let me close some of this. There we go. And so this is auxiliary number 4, but it turns out that auxiliary number 4 takes bus 6 as its input. So even though this bus is on channel strip number 4, so to speak, it's the aux4 channel strip, and I'll show you this in the mixer in a moment. It so happens that aux4 takes bus 6 as its input. Okay, so now let's go look in the mixer for a moment and see what that looks like. So over here are all my buses. And in this case, these are not actually buses, but rather these are auxiliary channel strips that take buses as their input. So you can see that the brass master, when I click it, knows that it is auxiliary channel strip number 4, but it actually is taking bus 6 for its input. And the brass reverb, notice this is taking bus 5 as its input, knows that it is auxiliary channel strip number 3, but it's taking bus 5 as its input, and it outputs to bus 6, which is the brass master, so that any audio material that I send from any of the channel strips to bus 5 gets reverbed and then output to bus 6. And exactly the exact configuration of the reverb is set here. You can pick one of the reverb programs you're going to use and edit it as you choose. And then you can control exactly how much reverb you're returning to the mix right here. So this becomes a master reverb for all the brass tracks that send signal to bus 5. And in the meantime, back over here where those brass tracks are, you can see that they are all sending to bus 5, and you can see they're all sending some, which means they're all getting reverbed a little bit. You can see by the little green line there how much is turned up to be sent to bus 5 in each of these tracks. And you can see that they output to bus 6. Okay, so that's a good example of a bus pair built around a track stack. Let me play this for you, because this may seem like overkill to you, like this is too much to be doing, it's too complicated, why do I have to work this way? So this arrangement takes 4 minutes, so I apologize for chewing up class time listening to it, but and I realize you can't read this, but it'll give you an idea of, because it's too small, but it'll give you an idea of the density of it as it goes by and the complexity of it And you can just imagine what a task it is to mix this many different tracks and make it make any sense. Are you able to hear that okay? Does it sound normal? Okay, good. We're not getting that horrible distortion. So, by the way, all the things you are, as I said in the before we had to restart, is this standard. It's a very simple tune. It's a lot of whole notes and half notes and a few quarter notes, literally. So if you know the tune, you probably won't know the tune. If you don't already know it, you probably won't know it after you hear this arrangement, because Professor Gasparo, who directs the studio orchestra, gave me the assignment of, quote, rip it up and put it back together again and make them sweat, meaning make his ensemble work really hard. So the tune is heavily disguised, ridiculously reharmonized, and probably over ornamented, and I was just having fun, so forgive me. Okay, so thank you. Come back Thursday for the veal. Is that the old joke? So anyway, it's complicated, right? It's really, really complicated. So if this was just this many flat tracks, and I was trying to put together a workflow that allowed me to wind up with any kind of a demo mix, I would just go out of my mind if I wasn't using the bus pair approach. As it is, I'm able to get the strings to sound like a unit on their bus, and I'm able to get the woodwinds to sound like a unit on their bus, and the brass to be a good submix on their bus, and then the percussions on their bus, and the rhythm section on their bus. And then I can basically do my mix by mixing buses and not do so much individual track manipulation. So my basic approach to a mix of a lot of complex tracks is divide and conquer. That's the approach I want you to take in doing one of your assignments for this coming week, where you're going to import a bunch of audio tracks, and I've given you 2 to choose from, and you're going to create bus pairs and create a rough mix using bus pairs to segregate different sections of the mix and make it make sense. So we'll talk more about that on Thursday. But for now, I just want to show you how to do this. So I'm just going to start from scratch here. I'm just going to get a new Logic file. And I'm going to make, I'll make 8 audio tracks, or pardon me, 8 software instrument tracks for right now. And just to make it easier to keep straight about what is what, we're going to go into the mixer here, and I'm going to pretend this is 4 trumpets. So I'm going to go up here now to the name, and I'm going to type trumpet 1, and watch what happens when I hit enter. Do you see it just named them successively, trumpet 1, 2, 3, and 4? Isn't that handy? And I'm going to take these and go up here and name them trombone 1. And when I hit enter, look, they're just automatically numbered the correct way. Isn't that handy? So now it's easy for you to see what those tracks are out here. So here's the workflow. So watch what I'm doing here right now. The order in which I'm doing this is pretty critical. So the first thing you want to do is, back in the mixer, you want to select the tracks that you want to put together into a bus pair. And first, oh, by the way, before I do that, there, I'm going to make that bigger so you can see something happen. First, go up to the sends area, click and hold, and just send to the first available bus. In this case, that happens to be bus 1. But of course, as you do this over and over, the available buses will be successively higher numbers as you create more bus pairs. So we're starting with bus 1. And did you see that auxiliary channel strip just automatically pop in there? It wasn't there before, and now it is. And notice that it takes bus 1 as its input. Now I'm ready to go back to the track window, or the main window, and select these 4 trumpet tracks. And I go to the track menu, create track stack. Notice there are 2 types of stacks, and for our purposes we're going to do summing stacks in this situation. Folder stacks can be useful sometimes, but honestly I don't use them that much. I mostly use summing stacks. Occasionally I use a folder stack. You're welcome to read about it in the online help. Basically it lets you create tracks and stuff them into folders, and then treat the whole folder as if it was a single track, but that's sounds fancier than it is. Okay, so I'm going to say create now. I chose summing stack, and look what it did. It automatically made this summing stack and made a new auxiliary channel strip. Back here, we now have a new one. It wasn't there a moment ago, was it? But it's there now. And you can see that it was by default named sum2. That just means it took its name from the number of the bus. And notice I never did choose bus 2. I simply created a new summing stack And the system looked at the bus that had already been used, bus 1, and so it went with the next available bus, which was bus 2. So we're going to see that behavior again when we do this with the trombones. So now what I need to do is a couple of things. I need to insert a reverb in aux 1, which is taking bus 1 as its input and is the destination for the bus 1 send of these channel input strips. And so I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to insert Chromaverb, and you can pick the program of your choice. For right now I'm just going to leave it at factory default, but there's all manner of programs here, and it's highly editable in a gazillion ways, and you're welcome to read up all about that. There's also lots of YouTube video on how to use this Chromaverb and so forth. Okay, so now I want aux 1, which is going to be the reverb for the trumpets, to output not to the stereo out, but to bus 2. So notice that when I come up here, bus 2 is no longer an option in the output listing here for buses. You see where I am right now? I'm in the output listing for buses, but bus 2 is not a direct option. Instead, I go to sum 2, and there it is, bus 2, which is associated with summing stack that is labeled at this point sum 2. Okay, I've done that. Now I'm going to rename this channel strip to be trumpet reverb. And I'm going to rename sum 2 to be trumpet master. Okay, so now here's what I know. Any signal that I send from these 4 tracks, and I'm going to turn up a little bit right now. Any signal that I send from these 4 tracks gets sent to the trumpet reverb bus, because this is sending to bus 1, and the trumpet reverb auxiliary channel strip takes bus 1 as its input. And then that reverb signal is output to bus 2, which happens to be the same master channel strip, or submaster really, channel strip, that these 4 trumpet tracks also output to. So here is dry signal going straight to bus 2, unreverbed signal going straight to bus 2. Up here is dry signal being sent to bus 1, but bus 1 is adding reverb to it, and then returning that reverb to bus 2. So now when I turn this up and down, I'm turning up whatever mixture of dry and reverb sound that I have created based on how much I send of each of these instruments, and what my reverb settings are in the Chromaverb, and how much total reverb I'm returning right here. So in the old days of analog mixing consoles with outboard reverb units, outboard reverb units were famously noisy. So it was a big deal in those days to be sure, due to the noise floor of those units, that you sent a lot of signal to the reverb to maximize how much signal you got versus the noise the reverb made all the time anyway. And then you returned as little as possible to get the musical effect you were trying to get. So the rule of thumb was send a lot, return a little, to return as little noise from the reverb as possible into your mix. These days, you folks are spoiled with all these super clean internal digital plugins, and so you can be pretty sloppy in your work habits. You can send a lot and return a little and do it, quote, the traditional correct way, but it doesn't really matter if you send a little and return a lot anymore, because these reverbs that are plugins are just so ridiculously quiet. Nevertheless, it's good to know that basic discipline. If you do sometime have a noisy plugin, one way to reduce how much noise that plugin is making is to send a lot to it and then not have to return as much to hear the same amount of effect from that plugin, whatever the plugin does. Okay, so that's a bus pair. And now here's what it looks like out here. If I click the little drop-down triangle, you can see that it hides the trumpet tracks from me, but I still see the master. So now I can put material in these tracks. I can put regions in these tracks. I can even do automated mixing on a track basis if I want to. But I also can actually put automation in this track. So you don't normally put anything in this track in the way of a region. You don't put regions in master tracks. But by having them in your track list, you're able to automate the motion of the fader for that track, just as you would any other kind of track-based automation, which we'll be discussing, but not quite yet. Okay, let's do the whole thing again for the 4 trombones, but I'm going to do it a lot faster now. So this is how long it takes to do it if you're not talking about it a whole lot. So 4 trombones, going to have them send to the next available bus, which happens to be bus 3. And I'm going to turn up a little, just as a starting point. There's bus 3. I'm going to put a reverb in it. It might have a different reverb than the trumpets. Probably not, but it might in terms of the reverb setting. Now I'm going back to the track window, select these 4 trombones, create track stack, summing stack, already selected, hit create. Now back to this window where now I'm ready to have the trombone reverb output to sum 4. And now I'm ready to rename this to be bone reverb. And I'm ready to rename this to be bone master. And that's basically it. So I've just now created a second bus pair for the trombones. Okay? So basically what I just illustrated here is partly what you're doing for this next assignment. You'll be playing this section of video again, I presume, to be sure that you remind yourself how to do this as you do that assignment. You'll just be doing it a little bit more and a little bit differently and following a slightly different set of instructions, but this is the concept. Okay, there's something to notice when you have renamed these auxiliary channel strips. Do you notice that when I'm here, for example, looking at the output of the trumpet reverb, do you see that now it knows that there's a trumpet master, and in the trumpet master I have these 2 buses. Isn't that interesting? So as you start naming things, it begins giving you useful feedback when you get into the menus about where you are. And here's the bone master, and it knows that bus 3 is the input for bone reverb, and bus 4 is the input for the bone master auxiliary channel strip. So as you name things, you'll start seeing them appear in the menus, and some people find it actually useful to name them right away before they start fiddling with the outputs up here, because that way the names can become a guide to what they're selecting. So it works either way. Okay, let me look at the next thing on my list here. Right now, of course, these are all just piano sounds because I just opened up default sampler instruments and they're just piano sounds. But what you're going to do is actually install trumpets and trombones. So let me show you what that looks like quickly. I'll just do trumpets right now, and you're going to do saxes also. So I'm going to now go to Studio Horns. There it is. Notice where I'm clicking. I'm clicking on the right edge so I can change the plug-in. You see that? Where that little up-down arrows are. And I'm going to Studio Horns, and I'm just going to choose stereo. And there's trumpet 1. That's what it comes up with by default. And my usual way of setting this up is like this. I prefer the controls because it just shows everything all at once. And I'm not a huge fan of graphic editors. It's okay. You're allowed to have your preference, but that's mine. By the way, all this stuff that you can see when you go to controls that you can't see when you're in the editor becomes visible to you if you click that little drop down. So if you click the little drop down here at the bottom of that window, then that brings into view the other parameters that you can't adjust from here, that I'm just an old-fashioned list kind of guy. And so here it is. So these are the articulations that Trumpet 1 is able to do. You can see it knows a lot of articulations. And I recommend turning off monophonic. These are things you can set in various ways. My typical way of setting it is to have auto vibrato be small. So I usually set it at some single-digit value just for a little human instability to the tone, you know, without it actually being a vibrato. And then I do not use modulation for the vibrato controller. I usually use aftertouch, meaning how hard I press the key after I have played the note. And then I use the mod wheel, instead of using it for vibrato controller, I use it combined with velocity to control the volume. So here's what's going to happen with these trumpet sounds when you have these settings. Oh, and I usually turn off legato transitions. They're nice to have when you're doing solo exposed stuff, but they make ensemble work get a little messy and sloppy. So I usually turn them off. And I usually, for trumpet 1, turn on extended range. And you can see, here's pitch bend range. Remember our friend pitch bend range? But you don't, turns out you don't need to use that note to pitch bend thing that much with these studio horn sounds that are built into Logic, because it has so many expressive articulations complete with scoops and falls and things, shakes. You really don't need to do that very often. Once in a while, there's some effects you want, like a trill maybe. That might be a good reason to do it. Okay, so with this set of parameters adjusted this way, I'm going to play the trumpet a little bit. So you're hearing expressive medium right now. I'm just going to play the note and hold it. That's what it does, and then it ends. I'm going to hit it easier. Now I'm going to hit hard. Okay, so that's expressive medium. And now let's listen to expressive short. You hear what the deal is there. Here's expressive long. And you'll hear that little shake in the tone. That's partly because I have a low auto vibrato. So you can reduce some of that if you want to by setting this to 0. Now, notice down here we said that modulation, the mod wheel in other words, would be part of the dynamic controller situation. So it would be partly mod wheel and partly velocity. You see this? So I'm going to put the mod wheel all the way up, and I'm going to go back to expressive medium just for you to hear something. Okay, mod wheel is all the way up right now, and I'm going to hit a note as hard as I can. Okay, now I'm going to hit a note as hard as I can and immediately turn the mod wheel down. Did you hear that nothing happened? I hope you noticed nothing happened. So that's because the mod wheel has little or no effect on any of these articulations that have a pre-cut envelope. So the main thing the mod wheel affects is articulations that are basically just sustaining articulations. And you're welcome to experiment with shake and growl and see what happens with the mod wheel with those if you have set these settings that way. However, now I'm going to choose sustain, and I'm going to hit a note really hard, but with the mod wheel all the way down. And you can hear that velocity overwhelmed the mod wheel. But now I'm going to hit the note really easy with the mod wheel all the way up. And not much is happening either. So do you see that at the extremes of either velocity or mod wheel, velocity mostly controls the day. But now I'm going to hit a note really easy with the mod wheel all the way down. And now I'm going to turn the mod wheel up and back down. Well, I didn't get it down before it ended, but you get the idea. So basically the mod wheel affects sustain primarily when you have this setting, and velocity does it the rest of the time. So most of the time when you're doing sort of pop-oriented writing for trumpets or any of these studio horns, which is trumpets, trombones, and saxes, you're going to end up using one of these pre-cut articulations Here's staccato, and it's just totally velocity based. It's just totally velocity based. Mod wheel just doesn't do a thing. So basically, let's try shake. I'm curious. And the mod wheel has no effect on that either. So it's just a velocity thing. By the way, if you happen to know anything about trumpet players doing shakes, the way they've implemented this is remarkably accurate. So the way trumpet players do shakes is they, finger a note and play a note, and then they shake the horn in a way that forces them to go up to the next available harmonic with the same note. And it's actually correctly programmed so that the higher you go, the closer the shakes get. But if you do one lower, they get farther apart. So you notice they get farther apart when you're lower, and they get closer together higher, which is exactly the way it works in the real world. So I recommend this as your settings for trumpet 1, and then I recommend just turning off extended key range, but everything else the same for trumpets 2, 3, and 4. And then for trombone 1, I recommend the same settings, but with extended key range on. And then for trombone 2, 3, and bass trombone, just this set of settings minus the extended key range. And if you do that, you'll have a fairly consistent situation going. So something else that you're supposed to do in this assignment coming up is to assign the appropriate articulation IDs for each of these tracks. So here's trumpet 1, and if you did all the installation you're supposed to have done, then you should be able to go to the articulation set now for trumpet 1. And for you, it may just show up as studio horns near the top of your menu. I have so many articulations that I put all these stock ones in the Logic folder. So you would go to Studio Horns, Studio Trumpet 1, right there. And then when you get to Trumpet 2, you would do Studio Trumpet 2 here. For Trumpet 3, Studio Trumpet 3, and so forth. Okay? So be sure to do the articulation ID. And other than that, just follow the instructions in that assignment. Please read that assignment carefully before our next class and ask any questions in that class that you have. This is the first assignment for this week that is related to what we're doing here. Okay, so I'm going back to all the things you are because I want to show you some things about how it's set up. So we're going to load it up. So one of the battles that you have when you're working with any large complex scoring project in any of these softwares is seeing what you need to see when you need to see it. So I don't know if you've seen people with some huge tall orchestral score or even a big band score scrolling up and down on the page trying to see everything, because if you have it zoomed way out so you can see the whole page on your laptop screen, it is usually unreadably small. So people therefore end up scrolling up and down in order to see from the top of the score to the bottom of the score, and it's a drag. And frankly, it's difficult to work that way. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to zoom that much. Well, that's fine. I can read all those notes now and work with them. But if I want to see the strings on the same page, or the other brass for that matter, I have to do this. So that's one page down, and this is yet another page down. So I had to do 2 page downs to see the whole score. So it turns out that there is a way of working that is very efficient, and you could make it a little bit smaller and still see it. So that's a little better than it was. And it's getting much smaller than this, and you really can't work with it in terms of seeing it well and all that. So here's what we've done. You already know about score sets, I know. You've made score sets for projects now, and you're going to make more for this next project. So look at my set of score sets. This is a version of the template from which I compose and arrange. So if you look at my score sets, you'll see that I have all these individual score sets for parts. And I have this score set for score. But look, I also have score brass, and it just shows me all the brass. And here, I'm going to get out of page view just so you can see better. So here's score brass. Here's score strings. Here's score woodwinds. So these are just all score sets that I made that I can work with, that I can easily flip into any time as I work, as I compose and arrange, so that I can see just what I'm interested in looking at right now without doing so much scrolling. It turns out to be faster to come over here and just say, I would just like to see the rhythm and percussion right now, than it does to, that's faster normally than scrolling up and down a lot. All right. Having said that, there's another bit of workflow here that is useful to be aware of, and that is that if you do not yet have a pre-made score set that shows a particular combination, here's what you can do. So suppose that you decided, I would like to see the high woodwinds and violin 1 and violin 2 and nothing else, because I want to see how they interact as higher instruments. So look, I'm selecting the 5 high woodwinds, so flute 1 / piccolo, flute 2, oboe, first and second clarinet. And then I'm scrolling down to violin 1 and violin 2. And now you can do two things. One is just directly open a new score window, and it normally will open with only showing you those tracks. Or you can just go to the layout menu and say create score set from selection. So now I'm looking at just that grouping. Well, now that I've made that grouping, I may want to see that grouping again sometime. So I'm going to go to the score sets, show score set on the layout menu, and I'm going to give this grouping a name. Look what its name is right now. Do you see it begins with an asterisk? That means that it was an automatically created score set just from some staves that I had selected out of a previous one. So now I'm going to double click here, space, score, high, woodwind, and string. There we go. So now that I've done that, now I can be on the score. And anytime I want to see the top woodwinds and the top strings, I can just go here and say, show me the score with the high woodwinds and strings. And there it is. So you can make as many of these temporary score sets as you need to make in order to see what you need to see when you need to see it with relatively minimal scrolling around. Scrolling is largely a waste of time, and I do very little of it. Instead, I work looking at score sets that show me what it helps me to see as I'm working. And so whenever I find myself scrolling in the score, if I'm looking at the score and I catch myself scrolling, about the next thing that I do typically is grab the things I want to see together and make a new score set, so that the next time I want to see that combination, I no longer have to scroll to get it. I hate to scroll. Scrolling feels to me a little bit like, well, here I go, pushing beans around the kitchen floor with my nose to spell my name. And you will hear me say that phrase more than once before our semester is over. I'm all about speed and efficiency and working fast. I'm all about trying to get good enough with the technology that I can push the technology out of my way and think about my music more and think about my technical workflow less. So that's why I make lots of score sets. This is kind of a foreign idea to people whose previous concept of composing has involved using notation softwares, because notation softwares are page-oriented, and it just doesn't normally occur to people who use those products to create special setups that only show particular combinations of staves for particular aspects of their working process. In fact, they can do it. It just doesn't usually occur to people to do it for some reason. I can't tell you how many times I've seen students show up at my office with Finale or Sibelius on their computer, scrolling up and down in their score. Both of them offer solutions to avoid this, but it just doesn't occur to people for some reason. So Logic just encourages you to do this. You can just make score sets at the drop of a hat on the fly, pretty much any time. If you'd like to see how the low woodwinds are interacting with, let's say, viola, cello, and bass, then you can make that score set. And after you've made it, you can name it. and it will be the highlighted one down here. And I'm going to say this is score, low, woodwind, and string. And now I've got it, and I can go back to it anytime. Notice that I typed a space before any of these score set names, and that's to make it possible to have them be alphabetized to the top of the score set list. Okay? Questions about that? Okay, there's another aspect of this template that I think you'll find interesting, and it's something that you want to learn how to do. I don't know if you've thought about it, but have you noticed how little time I spend opening and closing and resizing and dragging windows around? I do not spend much time opening windows. I don't spend much time closing windows. I don't spend much time rearranging windows, yada, yada, yada. Instead, I use score sets. So Logic has this built-in function for score sets. And up here you'll see, if you click the number up here, shows the number of your currently selected score set. So my current score sets are this one, which is tracks/project, this one, which is tracks, this one has tracks and the score, this one has the environment, this one has the mixer, and here's some other ones. But mostly I just use these first five. Mostly they solve my problem. So I just want to illustrate a thing for you. So I'm going to close this track window because it's actually in my screen set 3. Do you see that screen set 3 is score and tracks? So I'm going to close it. I just did Command W. And so now my screen set 3 is the score. And so notice that the key commands that choose the screen sets are over here. So here is Control, Option, Command 1 takes me to screen set 1. Oops, sorry, it opened on my other monitor. So I'm going to put it over here so you can see it. And I'm going to unlock it right now. See that little dot? That means it's locked. So I'm going to unlock it and then relock it. And that way it will open up on this monitor again next time I open it. So take a look at screen set 1 if you would. Now I'm going to go to screen set 4. So this is Control, Option, Command 4. Well, that was pretty quick. Now I'm going back to screen set 3. Screen set 2. It also opened over in my other monitor. Just a moment. Okay, now it will remember that it's in this monitor. Here's screen set 5. It's just a mixer. Here's screen set 2 again. Notice that screen set 2 remembered not to open in the other monitor after I moved it to the monitor that you're seeing. Here's screen set 1 again. Now watch this behavior. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close that, and I'm going to open an event list window. That's all in screen set 1. Do you see it? And now I'm going to go back to screen set 3. And back to screen set 1. And look, screen set 1 is just like it was the last time I entered it, without those changes I made. That's what it means for a screen set to be locked. When you lock a screen set, you can make changes to it, but they will not be remembered if you leave that screen set and return to that screen set. Now consider, just as workflow, what is faster here? Going back and forth between screen set 2, which shows my tracks, screen set 3, which shows my score, screen set 4 shows my environment, and screen set 5 shows the mixer. What's faster, that or opening and closing windows all the time? This is very quick, and in fact, I would argue that it is about as fast to change screen sets. Look up and see, if you have your screen so you can see me for a moment. Here, I'm going to do this just for a second. I want you to see. So I'm looking at my screen, and now I'm looking at my other screen. I believe that I can change screen sets and get my eye focused on what I want to see just about as fast as I can turn my head and get my eye focused on what I want to see. I can say screen set 2 and I'm in screen set 2, or screen set 3 and I'm in screen set 3, and just be there really fast. So if I was going to suggest something that's going to have a major impact on your workflow, it would be this. make a different screen set for each of the windows you commonly use. Get a habit formed of which windows you keep in which screen sets. And now you can work as if you have a multiple monitor system, because it is literally just about as fast to change screen sets as it is to turn your head and get your eye reoriented to a new physical location. Okay? So if you want to, you could argue that I just gave you 3 or 4 new computer monitors today whenever you're working in Logic Pro. So yes, yes, the very soul of generosity, that's me. Okay, we have 5 minutes left to go, and we're going to make a template that has a bunch of predefined screen sets and a bunch of predefined tracks and bus pairs and lots of stuff. I wanted to introduce you to step time recording a little bit today. So I'm going to just get a new track. I didn't know when to introduce step time recording. It doesn't naturally fit with what we've just been doing, but oh well, I'm just going to do it. And there's also a little introduction to that in one of the videos in the Logic playlist on YouTube. So you can look there as well, but I just wanted to mention this today. So right now, I'm just going to load a harp. And there it is. I got a harp. Okay, we're harping. I don't mean to keep harping on this all the time, but so sorry. Okay, I'm doing my best here. I know. Keep your day job. Okay, and I'm going to make a nice blank region and go into it. Okay, so here's a harp sound. Okay, so the problem here is that the way harpists play glisses, when they do a gliss, let's say that they're going to do a, here's a G9 sus gliss. But it doesn't sound harpy exactly. It doesn't sound like a harp would sound. The reason why is because harps actually play some of the notes twice. For example, in a G9 sus gliss, as they go by the E string has been tuned to be E sharp. So you actually would hear 2 Fs. And as they go by the C string, they actually play a C and a B sharp. So there would be 2 Cs and 2 Fs in a harpist G9 sus gliss. And that's due to how the harp works, and that's outside the scope of this class, but I wanted to, I think I put a video up about that. If I didn't, I will be on the Logic Pro playlist. So in any case, here we go. Here's how to do this in step time. So the first thing you want to do is go up here and get yourself a step input keyboard. And understand there's a difference between the step editor, the step sequencer, and the step input keyboard. Right now we're doing the step input keyboard. Try not to confuse them. And here's the fundamental difference between step time in Logic and speedy note entry in Logic, or the way people normally enter notes into Sibelius. In Finale with speedy note entry, or in Sibelius, you are not entering MIDI data in a direct way. You are entering musical graphics, which the system can interpret as MIDI data, but you have to think in terms of the graphics. But step time in Logic is totally about entering MIDI data, not entering graphics. Graphics will happen, but as an adjunct to the data. So for that reason, you're going to see some behaviors that you'll find interesting as I do this. I'm going to choose 30-second notes from my harp gliss, and I'm going to go up here and click the in on the MIDI in button. See that, MIDI in? I'm going to click it. So that now when I play, those notes are going to be entered in step time. And now I need to be sure I'm not in this window as the topped window. Do you see that it's highlighted right now? I need to be in the score window. I hate automatic zoom. Would all of you hold up your hand who hate automatic zoom? Would you all send a letter to Apple asking them to stop doing that by default? You can do that by going up here to the Logic Pro. Where is it here? Someplace. There used to be a menu here for sending feedback. What happened to the feedback menu? Have they decided to stop listening? Oh, here it is. Provide Logic Pro feedback. There it is. Go to that menu and send them a note asking them to, in their next version, please do not make automatic zoom come on by accident or by default. Make it something you must choose as a behavior before it will happen. Okay, thank you so much. So I need to then click in this staff, and now I'm going to play my gliss, and you might be able to see the notes I'm playing here. I'm not sure. Can you see them? No, you can't see them, but you'll see me play them. So I'm going to play A, 2 C's, D, 2 F's, G, A, 2 C's, D, 2 F's, G, A, 2 C's, D, 2 F's, and G. Okay, and when I play it, it sounds like this. Oops. Okay, so did you notice I still have step time turned on? So when I hit my right arrow to try to get the playhead to go over here, it was stepping through in 30-second notes. So after you have finished entering something in step time and you want to hear it, just turn step time off for a minute and then click in this window, and now oh, for pity ever. I'll close this too. Okay. It's stuck. It's stuck at 30 seconds. Help. Save me. Nathaniel, did you do this to my computer? Okay, we're back. Nathaniel, I hope you understand that you've become my scapegoat. In every class, one must have a scapegoat. And so basically, when something goes wrong, I blame you. It's very simple. Okay? So let's get you. Some of you may have known a student named Stephen Rader. He was my scapegoat like 2 or 3 years ago. And there was a couple of years where it was a guy named Adam Toon. So here we go. You have to admit that sounds a lot more harp glissy than you could ever play, because you can't play repeated notes that fast while doing a smooth arpeggio, no matter how good a keyboard player you may be. So that's an excuse to do step time. Did you notice that as it was happening, things didn't quite look right? And because I was stepping in 30-second notes, right? But they don't look like 30-second notes. They look like 16th triplets, and these just look like 16ths. But if I went to treble, so it's all in one clef, now it all looks like 16th triplets, I would have to, over here in the score quantize, go to 32 or 32-24, and now they look like 30-second notes finally. Okay? So the kind of behavior you just saw just isn't how it works in Finale or Sibelius. If you were stepping in 30-second notes, you would immediately see 30-second notes graphically. But logic, again, is letting you input the data, but still giving you completely separate control over how it's going to look. Now, the fact of it is that at the end of the day, we wouldn't normally present this as a harp gliss this way. So that's a very rough intro to how step time works. Normally, I would show them the first note and a diagonal line and say G9 sus, and I would, as a chord symbol, and I would have set up the harp pedals for them previously so that all they have to do is just start here and just kind of rip through the strings and get where they want to get. So you would hide most of these notes with the staff style. You would select all of these, put them on a MIDI channel that the staff style doesn't display. You'd make this note long enough to be the length of the gliss, and then you'd put the diagonal line and write the word gliss. And the harpist will thank you for that instead of showing them all this mess. So I think I have accomplished my pedagogical aims for the day. You should have enough background at this point to start doing the first assignment for this week. Please don't wait until the weekend to start doing the first assignment for this week. It would be really beneficial for you to start doing it before class on Thursday, so that on Thursday you can ask questions if you need to. Okay? So thank you for your patience with my technical issues today. I'm going to get my new audio interface and I'll be a happy man. And so blessings upon you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. And by the way, I'm happy with how most of you are getting your homework done, and most of you are doing a decent job of it. And I'm happy with you on the whole as a class for how you're doing. So keep it up. Stay caught up, please, with your homework and all that, and we'll go through all this together. And blessings upon you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
See you. See you. See you.